I buried my brother 42 years ago. His name was Daniel Harris. Everyone called him Danny. He was 19 when the Greyhound bus he was riding slid off the Kokala Highway during a January snowstorm in 1983. The news said 17 passengers died that night. Danny was one of them. I was 23 years old when I stood in a cold morgue in Hope, British Columbia, and identified his body. I remember the smell of disinfectant, the hum of fluorescent lights, the way my hands wouldn't stop shaking no matter how hard I tried to steady them. They pulled back the sheet and showed me a face that was bruised, swollen, almost unrecognizable. The crash had been violent. The body had been exposed to the cold for hours before they recovered it. But I looked at the shape of the face, the color of the hair, the build of the body, and I said the words that would define the next 4 decades of my life. Yes, that's my brother. That's Daniel Harris. A few days later, I stood in front of our mother and told her that her youngest son was gone. She made a sound I'd never heard before, something between a scream and a sob, and then she folded in on herself like something inside her had broken. I've replayed that moment more times than I can count. It never changes. It never hurts less. Life, as it does, moved forward anyway. I married Sarah. We had children. I built a career. Birthdays came and went. Christmases passed, but there was always an empty chair in the room, an unspoken absence that followed us everywhere. Our mother never recovered. She lived another 32 years. But part of her stayed frozen in that January of 1983. She died 10 years ago, still grieving the son she believed she'd buried. Last Tuesday, my phone rang at 2 o'clock in the morning. At 65, you learn that nothing good comes from calls at that hour. For a moment, I just stared at the screen. The number wasn't saved in my contacts, but the area code was 604, Vancouver. I almost let it go to voicemail. Something made me reach for it anyway. Maybe it was instinct. The same instinct that used to wake me when Danny had nightmares as a kid. The same instinct that told me, even after all these years, that my little brother was never really far away. "Hello," I said. There was a pause. Breathing on the other end, heavy, uneven, like the caller wasn't sure how to begin. "Michael," a voice said. "Is this Michael?" I sat up in bed. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The voice sounded rough, uncertain, like someone who hadn't used it much in a long time. But underneath that roughness was something else, something that made the hair on my arm stand up. "Who is this?" I asked. More breathing. Then, quietly, almost apologetically, the voice said, "It's me. It's Danny." The phone slipped out of my hand and hit the floor. For a second, I couldn't move. My hands were shaking so badly it felt like they didn't belong to me anymore. I bent down, picked the phone up, and pressed it back to my ear. The line was still open. I could hear him breathing. "This isn't funny," I said. My voice cracked. "Whoever you are, this is sick. My brother died 42 years ago." "I know," the voice said. "I know how long it's been. I just figured out who I am." I felt dizzy, like the room was tilting. "What are you talking about?" "I found something," he said. "A newspaper clipping about a bus crash. There was a picture. My picture. But the name under it said, Daniel Harris. And I knew that was me. I couldn't breathe. My chest felt tight, like someone was sitting on it. "Where are you?" I managed to ask. "I don't really know," he said. "Somewhere called the downtown East Side. That's what people tell me. I think I stay at a shelter on East Hastings Street." His words came slowly, carefully, like each one took effort. "I don't remember how I got here. I don't remember anything before about 15 years ago. I just woke up in a hospital one day, and they said I'd been found on the street. No ID, no name, nothing." My mind raced. This couldn't be real. It had to be a scam. Someone who'd found Danny's name somewhere and decided to torture an old man with it. "What do you remember?" I asked, testing him. "Not much," he said. "Just feelings. I dream about snow, about being cold, about people screaming, and sometimes I dream about a house with a blue door." My throat closed, and someone, he continued softly, "used to make pancakes, blueberry pancakes, every Sunday. Tears came without warning, hot and sudden. I remembered that house. I remembered the blue door. I remembered our mom standing at the stove every Sunday morning, flipping pancakes while Danny hovered nearby, stealing them off the plate before anyone else could get one. "What do you look like?" I whispered. He hesitated. "Old," he said, "really old. I've lived rough, but I found that picture in the newspaper, and even though it's 42 years old, I can see myself in it. Same eyes. Danny had a scar." I said, my voice barely steady, "On his left forearm, from when he fell off his bike when he was 7, 12 stitches. There was a long silence. Then he said, "I have a scar on my left forearm." I never knew where it came from. I was crying now, the kind of crying I hadn't done since the day we buried him. "Give me your address," I said. "I'm coming to get you." "I don't think you should," he said quietly. "I don't think I'm the person you remember. Tell me where you are," I said firmly. "Right now." He gave me the address, a shelter on East Hastings Street. I wrote it down with shaking hands. It was a 7-hour drive from Kelowna to Vancouver. "Stay there," I said. "Don't go anywhere. I'm leaving right now." "Okay," he said softly. "I'll wait." The line went dead. I sat in the dark for 30 seconds, trying to understand what had just happened. Then I stood up, pulled on my clothes, grabbed my wallet and keys. Sarah stirred beside me. "Michael," she said sleepily. "What's wrong?" "I have to go to Vancouver," I said. My voice sounded distant, even to me. At 2 in the morning, I'll explain later. I was out the door before she could ask another question. The drive was the longest 7 hours of my life. I kept the radio off. My mind replayed the call over and over, torn between certainty and disbelief. Part of me knew it had to be a lie, but another part, the part that had never truly let go of my brother, knew it was real, and that terrified me more than anything. The closer I got to Vancouver, the worse the thoughts became. I kept replaying the day at the morgue in my mind. I was 23, barely more than a kid myself, standing in a room that smelled like chemicals and grief. They'd warned me the body had been badly damaged, the crash had been violent, the cold had done its own work. When they pulled back the sheet, I remember feeling detached, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. I hadn't looked for Danny's face so much as I'd looked for reasons to believe it was him, the hair color, the height, the general shape of the body. I told myself it made sense. I needed it to make sense. What if it hadn't been him? The thought sat in my chest like a weight as the highway signs started pointing toward Vancouver. Because if I'd been wrong, then Danny hadn't died that night. He'd been alive. Somewhere, alone, hurt, not knowing who he was. While I went on with my life, I reached the downtown east side just before noon. I'd heard about it for years, but nothing prepares you for seeing it in person. Block after block of worn-down buildings. People slumped against walls, sitting on sidewalks, moving slowly like the world weighed more on them than it did on everyone else. The air smelled like damp concrete and desperation. This was where my brother had been living. The shelter on East Hastings Street was a low, gray building that looked older than it probably was. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the smell hit me immediately. Industrial cleaner trying and failing to cover the scent of too many bodies in too small a space. A woman sat behind a desk near the entrance. She looked up as I approached. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for someone," I said. My voice sounded strange, tight. He may not remember his name, but he used the phone here around 2 this morning. She studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Danny." "Right." My heart skipped. "Yes, he was pretty shaken up," she said. "Asked if he could make an emergency call. Sweet guy. Keeps to himself. He's been coming here on and off for years. Is he here now?" "Check the common room," she said, pointing to a door on the left. I walked toward it slowly, my legs feeling unsteady. The common room was large and dim, filled with mismatched tables and chairs. A television murmured in one corner. A dozen people were scattered around the room, some eating, some staring into nothing. And then I saw him. He was sitting alone near the window, his back to me. His hair was gray, longer than it should have been, pulled back into a loose ponytail. He wore a flannel shirt that had clearly lived a long life. His shoulders were hunched, like he was trying to disappear into himself. "Danny," I said. He turned around. The man who looked at me was not the brother I remembered. His face was deeply lined, his skin darkened and weathered from years outdoors. There was a scar across his left cheek I'd never seen before. He looked closer to 70 than 60. A lifetime had been etched into his face, but his eyes, brown, with flecks of gold, our father's eyes, Danny's eyes, Michael, he said, and his voice cracked. I couldn't speak. I just stood there, staring at him like he might vanish if I blinked. You came, he said quietly. I wasn't sure you would. Show me your arm. I said. The words came out harsher than I intended. Your left arm. He hesitated, then slowly rolled up his sleeve. The scar was there, long, faded, unmistakable, exactly where it should have been. My knees went weak. I grabbed the edge of the table to steady myself. I need to sit down, I said. He pulled out a chair for me, careful, gentle. I collapsed into it. He sat across from me, watching me like I might run. Tell me about the crash, I said. Tell me what you remember. He took a breath. I don't remember the crash itself, but I have nightmares. I'm on a bus. It's snowing. The driver's trying to slow down, but we're sliding. People are screaming, and then it's cold. So cold I think I'm going to die. He rubbed his face with both hands. Then nothing. Just darkness. What's the next thing you remember? Waking up in a hospital, he said. A nurse told me I'd been found on the street, that I'd been unconscious. They said I'd been beaten and robbed. I didn't remember that either. What year? 2010, he said. February. I think. My mind reeled. 15 years after the crash. What about before that? I asked. Anything. Just fragments, he said. Being cold a lot, working hard, construction maybe, getting paid in cash. It all feels like a dream I can't quite wake up from. His hands were scarred and calloused, the hands of someone who'd worked until his body gave out. For a long time. He said quietly, I didn't try to remember. I just survived. I swallowed. What made you start trying a volunteer? He said. She was sorting old newspapers. One was from January 1983. Something about the date felt important. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a carefully folded piece of yellowed paper. He smoothed it on the table between us. The headline stared back at me. 17 dead in highway disaster, and there he was. My brother's face, young, smiling. The photo our mom had given the paper, I knew that face, he said. And the name, Daniel Harris. It felt right. I stared at the clipping, my vision blurring. I found your name, he continued. It took me months to work up the courage to call. I don't know if I can believe this, I said, because if you're Danny, then I identified the wrong body. He flinched. I'm sorry. Our mom died 10 years ago. I said, she never knew. Tears streamed down his face. We sat there together, two old men crying in a shelter full of strangers. Finally, I wiped my eyes. We need a DNA test, I said. That's the only way. He nodded. Okay. I pulled out my phone and found a private lab downtown that could do same-day testing. Come on, I said, standing. Let's go. As we walked out together, I realized how small he looked beside me. Not just thinner, but worn down. The years had taken something from him they'd never give back. And as we stepped into the street, one thought echoed louder than all the others. Whatever the truth was, there was no turning back now. The DNA lab was downtown, in a glass building that looked clean and modern, completely disconnected from the life my brother had been living. As we walked in, I became suddenly aware of the contrast between us. I wore clean clothes, pressed jeans, a jacket Sarah had bought me years ago. Danny wore borrowed pants from the shelter and a jacket that was too thin for the season. No one said anything, but I felt the looks. The test itself was quick. Paperwork, signatures, a technician with a calm but practiced voice explaining cheek swabs and timelines. 48 hours for results. She said it like it was nothing, like she wasn't holding our entire lives in her hands. When we stepped back outside, the city noise rushed in around us. I realized I hadn't thought beyond this moment, hadn't thought about what Danny would do tonight. "Where are you staying?" I asked. "The shelter," he said. "Same place." I looked at him, really looked, at the way he stood slightly hunched like he was bracing for impact even when nothing was happening, at his shoes, worn thin at the soles. "No." I said, "You're not going back there tonight. You don't have to, I know," I interrupted. "But you're not. I booked a hotel near Stanley Park, 2 beds, paid cash." The clerk gave us a look, but I didn't care. I'd stopped caring about appearances somewhere between the phone call and the shelter. In the room, I ordered pizza. Danny stood awkwardly by the door like he wasn't sure he was allowed to exist in a place like this. When I told him to take a shower, he hesitated, then nodded. He was in there a long time, almost 45 minutes. When he finally came out, his hair was wet and slicked back, the patchy beard gone. His face looked different, still weathered, still marked by years I could only imagine, but clearer somehow. I could see my brother in him now, not the boy from memory, but the bones of him, the jawline, the way his eyebrows pulled together when he was nervous. We ate pizza in silence, the television murmuring in the background. Finally, he spoke. "Thank you," he said, "for believing me enough to try. I don't know what I believe yet." I said honestly, "But I need to know." He nodded. "Can I ask you something, of course? What was I like?" he asked. "Before?" The question hit me harder than I expected. I set my slice down and leaned back against the headboard. "You were good," I said after a moment. "Really good. You cried when you saw Roadkill. You wanted to be a veterinarian. You were starting college in Vancouver that fall. You were excited about everything." He listened like every word mattered. "You made Mom laugh." I continued. "Even on her worst days, and when Dad left, you were 12. But you told me we'd be okay. You said we'd take care of her together." Tears slid down his face. Silent. "I wish I could remember," he whispered. "Maybe you will," I said, though I wasn't sure. That night, I lay awake listening to his breathing in the bed beside mine. Slow, steady, the breathing of someone who finally felt safe enough to sleep. I thought about calling Sarah. Instead, I sent a text. "I'm okay. I'll explain everything when I get home." She replied immediately. "I love you. Be safe." The next day, we walked through Stanley Park. It felt important to move, to not just sit and wait. Danny told me about his life on the streets, the shelters, the winters, the jobs that paid cash and asked no questions, the beatings, the fog in his mind. "I always felt like I was waiting for something," he said, "staring out at the water, like there was a place I was supposed to be." The phone rang Thursday afternoon. I answered it with shaking hands. "Mr. Harris," the woman said, "your DNA results are conclusive. The probability of siblingship is 99.97%. The room tilted. I sat down hard on the bed. "You're certain?" I asked. "Yes, sir." I hung up and looked at him. "It's you." I said, "You're really Danny." He laughed and cried at the same time. "I'm Daniel Harris," he said, like he was trying the name on for the first time. We held each other for a long time. Later that afternoon, we went to see Dr. Patricia Walsh at a free clinic he'd been visiting. She listened carefully as we explained everything. Then she examined him. "You have extensive evidence of old trauma," she said. "Multiple healed fractures, significant head injury." She looked at me. "I believe he survived the crash. But in the chaos and the snow, he was likely missed." "What happened to him?" I asked. "I think someone found him," she said, "and used him." The words settled heavy in the room. Years of exploitation. She continued. "That kind of trauma changes a person." When we left the clinic, the sky was darkening. I stopped on the sidewalk and turned to him. "Come home with me," I said. "Come to Kelowna." He looked afraid. "I don't know how to be part of a family." "We'll learn," I said. He nodded slowly. "Okay." The drive home felt different. When we pulled into my driveway, Sarah was waiting on the porch. She opened her arms. "Welcome home, Danny," she said. He hesitated, then stepped into her embrace, his shoulders shaking, and I knew, in that moment, that whatever we'd lost, something had been given back. The first few days after we brought Danny home felt unreal. It was like living with a ghost who had slowly decided to become solid again. He moved carefully through the house, quietly, as if he were afraid someone might tell him he didn't belong there. He apologized constantly for taking up space, for eating too much, for not eating enough, for asking questions, for not asking them. Sarah handled it better than I did. She had a steadiness about her, a calm that grounded the room. She showed him where the towels were kept, how the coffee maker worked, which light switch controlled what. Small things, normal things, things Danny hadn't had in decades. That first night, he barely slept. I could hear him pacing down the hallway long after the house had gone quiet. When morning came, he sat at the kitchen table with a mug of coffee he didn't drink, staring out the window like he was bracing himself for something bad to happen. "You don't have to be on guard here," I told him. He nodded. But I could see in his eyes that he didn't believe me. Not yet. Over the next week, fragments began to surface. Not full memories, not scenes he could place in time, but impressions, smells, sensations. He flinched when a door slammed. He froze when a truck backfired down the street. One afternoon, Sarah was cooking bacon, and Danny suddenly had to sit down, his hands shaking. "It smells like Saturdays," he said quietly. "I don't know why." I did. Saturdays were when Mom made breakfast for dinner because Danny liked it better that way. We started therapy with Dr. Walsh twice a week. She warned us it wouldn't be linear. That memory doesn't return like a switch being flipped. It leaks back in slowly, unpredictably, sometimes painfully. He may never remember everything, she told us. And even if he does, those memories will be layered over decades of trauma. He isn't going back to who he was. He's building who he is now. Danny struggled with that idea. I could see it in the way he asked about the past, like he was searching for instructions he'd lost. "What did I like?" he asked one evening as we sat on the back deck watching the lake turn orange at sunset. "Music. I mean, you loved Springsteen," I said. "And anything loud. You used to turn it up just to annoy Mom." He smiled at that, a small smile, but real. "I don't like loud now." "I know," I said. That loss sat between us, not spoken, but understood. My kids met him slowly, one at a time. They were cautious, respectful. This man wasn't an uncle they'd grown up with. He was a stranger with familiar blood. My daughters asked questions gently. My son kept his distance at first, watching from the doorway like he was waiting to see what kind of man Danny would turn out to be. My grandson, though, had no such hesitation. He walked straight up to Danny one afternoon, looked at him with complete seriousness, and said, "Are you my great-uncle?" Danny blinked. "I think so." "Okay." My grandson said, "Do you want to see my dinosaurs?" From that moment on, Danny relaxed around the kids in a way he didn't around adults. He laughed more. He spoke more. Children didn't ask where he'd been or why he didn't remember. They accepted what was in front of them. Some nights, he talked in his sleep, shouted sometimes. Once, I found him sitting on the floor of his room at 3 a.m, his back against the bed, knees pulled to his chest. "I'm sorry," he said immediately, like he'd been caught doing something wrong. "You don't have to apologize." I told him, "You're safe." He nodded. But again, I could tell the words hadn't settled yet. One afternoon, he asked about the grave. "There's a headstone," I said carefully, "with your name on it." He thought about that for a long time. "Does that mean I died?" I didn't know how to answer. "You died to us," I said finally. "But you're here now. We didn't decide what to do about it. Dr. Walsh told us there was no urgency, that some things could remain unresolved for a while." Around the second month, Danny asked if he could work. "I don't like just sitting," he said. "It makes my head too loud. We found a part-time job at a local garden center. The owner didn't ask many questions. Danny was good with plants. He treated them gently, attentively. He came home with dirt under his fingernails and stories about customers who reminded him of people he might have known once. They don't judge," he said about the plants. "They just grow." One evening, as we sat outside, he said something that stayed with me. "I think I'm starting to feel like me." He said, Not the old me, not the guy from the streets, something in between. That makes sense. I said, sometimes I feel guilty. He continued, for being alive. I understood that too well. I told him about Mom, about how she never stopped missing him, about how she used to set an extra plate at Thanksgiving without realizing she was doing it. I'm sorry, he said. So am I. I said, late at night, when the house was quiet. The guilt crept in for me, too. The what-ifs, the years lost, the life Danny should have had, the life Mom should have seen. But every morning, I'd hear him moving around the kitchen, making coffee, trying to hum a tune he couldn't quite remember. And I reminded myself of what mattered. He was alive, he was here, and slowly, day by day, he was learning how to stay. 3 months have passed since Danny came home. Some days feel almost normal now, ordinary in a way that still surprises me. We wake up, drink coffee, talk about the weather. He goes to work at the garden center 3 days a week. He likes the early shifts, when the place is quiet and the plants are still wet with morning dew. Other days are harder. The nightmares haven't stopped. They come less often, but when they do, they leave him shaken for hours. Loud noises still make him flinch. Crowded places drain him. He avoids mirrors sometimes, like he's not always ready to face the man looking back at him. Therapy helps. Slowly. Painfully. Dr. Walsh reminds us often that healing isn't about erasing the past, but learning how to live alongside it. Danny listens. He works at it. That alone amazes me. After everything he survived, he still tries. Little memories surface without warning. One afternoon, I was cleaning out the garage when Danny wandered in and stopped short. He stared at an old red toolbox on the shelf. I know this, he said. I don't know how, but I do. It was Dad's. I told him, you used to sit beside him and hand him tools. Even when he didn't ask, Danny touched the metal gently, like it might disappear. He didn't say anything else, but later that night, he told me he'd dreamed of holding a wrench in hands much smaller than the ones he has now. The kids have settled into a rhythm with him. My daughters invite him to dinner. My son asks his opinion about small things, like where to plant a tree or how to fix a loose board. My grandson has officially decided that Danny is his best friend. They spend hours in the yard, digging in the dirt, looking for worms. Danny smiles more around them. It's still a cautious smile, like he's testing it out. But it's real. Last week, he remembered Christmas. Not all of it. Just a moment. He was 8 years old. Snow on the ground. Me handing him a bike I'd saved up for months to buy. He told me about it later that night, his voice unsteady. I didn't remember your face. He said, just the feeling, like someone cared enough to try. I sat with that for a long time after he went to bed. We talk sometimes about the grave, about the headstone with his name on it, about whether it should stay or change or become something else entirely. We don't push for answers. Some things don't need to be decided right away. One evening, Danny asked me a question I'd been dreading. Do you ever blame yourself, he asked. For identifying the wrong body, I didn't hesitate. Every day. He nodded like he'd expected that answer. Don't, he said. You were 23. You'd just lost your brother. You did what anyone would have done. I should have looked harder. I said, if you had. He replied quietly, they might not have found me. I might have died out there. At least this way. I'm here. I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that wasn't how it worked. But part of me knew he was right. Late at night, I still lie awake thinking about the years we lost, the birthdays, the holidays, the moments that never happened. I think about Mom most of all, about how she never got to know he was alive. That's the part that still hurts the most. One night, Danny joined me on the back deck. The lake was dark and still. The stars were bright. Do you think she knows? He asked. Wherever she is, I think she does, I said. I think she's been watching over you. He smiled at that. A rare, easy smile. I'm glad you answered the phone, he said. So am I. He's still finding himself. He may never remember everything. He may always carry the scars of the life he lived and the one he lost. But he's learning how to belong again, how to be a brother, an uncle, a friend. And I'm learning too. I'm learning that grief doesn't end when someone comes back. It just changes shape. I'm grieving the boy who got on that bus at 19, the life he should have had. But I'm also grateful beyond words, because against every odd, he survived. Hope, I've learned, isn't foolish, not even after 42 years. Family isn't just about shared memories. It's about choosing each other, again and again, even when it's hard. My brother came back from the dead, and somehow, we're both learning how to live again. Some nights, after the house has gone quiet, I still hear Danny moving softly down the hallway. He doesn't pace as much anymore. The restless walking, the constant checking of doors and windows, those things have faded. But sleep is still a fragile thing for him. When the nightmares come, they leave him wide awake, sitting on the edge of the bed, waiting for his body to remember where it is. On those nights, we sit together in the kitchen, no lights except the one above the sink. Coffee sometimes, tea sometimes, silence most of the time. It doesn't feel awkward. It feels earned. A few weeks ago, he told me something that caught me off guard. "I don't think I want to remember everything," he said. "Not all at once, anyway." I nodded. I understood. There are memories even I wouldn't want to reopen after all these years. "I think I just want enough," he continued. "Enough to know who I am, enough to feel like my life makes sense. It does make sense now, in its own painful way." Dr. Walsh says that meaning often comes later, long after survival is no longer the goal. Danny survived first. Now he's learning how to live. The garden center offered him more hours last week. He came home that afternoon with dirt on his jeans and pride in his eyes. "They said I'm good with customers." He told me, almost surprised, that people trust me. Of course they do. Danny always had that effect on people, even when he doesn't remember it. We still haven't changed the headstone. It stands quietly in the cemetery in Kelowna, bearing the name Daniel Harris and a date that isn't quite true. Sometimes I think of it as a marker for the life that stopped, not the man who survived. Maybe it can be both. There's no rush to decide. My kids talk to him more easily now. My son asks him to help with projects around the house. My daughters invite him over without hesitation. My grandson still thinks it's the greatest thing in the world that his great-uncle lives with us. Danny smiles most when the kids are around. It's like they give him permission to exist without explanation. Every so often, another memory surfaces. Small ones. The way the house smelled in summer. The sound of Mom humming while she cooked. The feeling of safety he hadn't known was missing until it came back. The other night, as we sat on the deck watching the sun sink behind the lake, he said something that stayed with me. "I don't feel like I'm becoming who I was," he said. "I feel like I'm becoming someone new, someone who includes who I was." That sounds right. I said, "For 42 years, I lived with the certainty that my brother was gone. I carried that grief like a scar that never quite healed. Now he's here, and the grief hasn't disappeared. It's changed. I grieve the boy he was. I grieve the life he should have had. I grieve for our mother, who died without knowing the truth. That will never stop hurting. But alongside that grief is something I never expected. Gratitude, awe, a quiet, steady joy. Against every odd, my brother survived. He survived the crash. He survived being forgotten. He survived years of being used, lost, invisible, and somehow he found his way back. People ask me now if I believe in miracles. I don't know about miracles, but I believe in resilience. I believe in the stubbornness of the human spirit. I believe in answering the phone, even when you're afraid of what you might hear. Most of all, I believe it's never too late for a second chance. Danny is home. He's alive. He's learning who he is, one day at a time, and I'm right here with him, learning how to be his brother again, or maybe learning how to be his brother for the first time. Either way, that's enough. That's everything. The first real test came quietly, not with nightmares or memories or tears, but with paperwork. One afternoon, Danny came home from the garden center holding an envelope like it might bite him. Inside was a form his supervisor had asked him to fill out. Emergency contact, date of birth, social security number. He stared at it for a long time before bringing it to me. "I don't know how to answer these," he said. "I know the facts now, but they don't feel like mine." We sat at the kitchen table. The same one where he'd once sat afraid to drink his coffee. I explained what I could, where to find records, how we'd request replacements, how long it might take. I feel stupid, he said quietly. You're not. I told him, you're doing something most people never have to do. You're building a life from the ground up. That night, he barely slept. In therapy, Dr. Walsh had warned us about this stage, the part where survival ends and identity begins. When the adrenaline fades and the weight of what was lost finally settles in. It's common for trauma survivors to feel overwhelmed once things stabilize, she said. Safety gives the mind permission to feel. Danny felt everything, some days. He was angry. Not explosive anger, but something sharper, quieter, anger at the years taken from him. At the men who used him, at a system that never noticed he was missing. I don't even know who to be mad at. He said once, they don't have names, they're just shadows. Other days, he was withdrawn. He'd sit in the living room staring at nothing, his hands folded together, like he was afraid that if he let go, he might disappear again. One evening, after a particularly hard therapy session, he surprised me. Do you want to go see the place, he asked? The cemetery. He nodded. I think I need to. We went the next morning. The cemetery was quiet, the kind of quiet that presses in on you. Danny walked slowly, his hands in his pockets, until we reached the headstone. Daniel Harris, 1963-1983. Beloved son and brother. He stood there for a long time without speaking. I feel like I'm standing at my own funeral, he said finally. I didn't know what to say. I don't hate this, he continued, but I don't belong to it either. He knelt down and touched the stone, tracing his own name with his fingers. This is who I was, he said, not who I am. We left without changing anything. That night, Danny had one of the worst nightmares I'd seen yet. He woke up shouting, disoriented, convinced he was back in the snow. It took a long time to bring him back. Afterward, we sat on the floor of his room, our backs against the bed. I don't want to lose myself again, he said. I'm scared that if I dig too deep, I won't come back. You won't be alone. I said, not this time. A few days later, he made a decision of his own. He asked Dr. Walsh about group therapy. I think I need to hear other people, he said. People who survive things like me. The group met in a small community center room once a week. Veterans, abuse survivors, former addicts, people with stories that didn't fit neatly into conversation. The first night, Danny barely spoke. He listened. He watched. On the drive home, he was quiet. They talk like I feel, he said finally, like something broke, but not everything. That was the first night he slept through without waking. Slowly, he began to claim small pieces of independence. He started taking the bus to work instead of asking me for rides. He opened his own bank account. He chose new clothes instead of wearing what Sarah picked out for him. One afternoon, he came home carrying a used guitar. I don't know if I can play, he said. But I remember wanting to. He couldn't play much, just a few clumsy chords, but he kept at it, his fingers sore, his patience thin. Watching him learn how to want things again was harder than I expected. Wanting meant risk. Wanting meant disappointment, but it also meant he was alive. And for the first time since he'd come home, I saw him looking toward the future instead of back at the past. Spring arrived quietly. It didn't announce itself with anything dramatic, just longer days, softer light in the mornings. The lake losing its edge of cold. Danny noticed it before I did. He always had a way of paying attention to things that grew slowly. One afternoon, he came home from work and set his jacket down carefully, the way he does when his mind is full. I signed up for a class. He said, "What kind of class?" "Community college." He replied, "Intro to horticulture. Nights. Once a week." I smiled. "That sounds like you." "I don't know if I'll be good at it," he said, "but I want to try." That word again, want. It still felt fragile when he used it, like he was testing whether it was allowed. The first night of class, I drove him and waited in the parking lot, reading in the car like I used to when my kids were younger. When he came out, his face was flushed. They asked us to introduce ourselves. He said, "I almost didn't speak." "But you did." I said my name. He told me, "Daniel, Just Daniel. And it didn't feel wrong. That mattered more than any grade ever could. Not everything moved forward smoothly. Some weeks were setbacks. A loud argument in a grocery store sent him spiraling for days. An unexpected question from a customer at work about his past left him shaken and silent the entire drive home. But he didn't disappear anymore. He didn't retreat into himself the way he used to. He talked. He asked for help. That was new. One evening, as we sat on the deck, he asked me something unexpected. "Do you ever feel like you have to earn being happy?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "All the time. I feel that," he said. Like surviving wasn't enough. Like I have to justify being here. I thought about all the years he'd been invisible, all the ways the world had taught him he didn't matter. "You don't owe anyone an explanation," I said. "Not for surviving, not for being here." He nodded. But I knew it would take time for that truth to settle. A few weeks later, Sarah suggested a small gathering. Nothing big, just family, dinner on the deck. Danny was nervous. He worried about saying the wrong thing, about being stared at. No one stared. They listened. They laughed. They passed plates and refilled glasses. At one point, Danny was telling a story about a stubborn rose bush at the garden center, and everyone was leaning in, genuinely interested. Later, after everyone had gone home, he stood in the kitchen and looked around. "I think this is what normal feels like," he said. I smiled. "It's overrated." He laughed, a real laugh, loud enough that it startled him. The guitar sits in the corner of his room now. He practices most evenings. He's not good, but he's improving. Sometimes I hear him working through the same chord progression over and over, patient in a way that tells me he's learned how to endure failure without it breaking him. We still talk about the past, about Mom, about the years we lost. That grief hasn't gone away, and it never will, but it no longer owns every conversation. One night, as we washed dishes together, he said something I'll never forget. "I don't think I need to know everything anymore," he said. "I know enough. Enough for what to live." I watched him dry his hands, fold the towel, and hang it back where it belonged. Small, ordinary gestures, proof of a life reclaimed inch by inch. Sometimes I think about the phone call, about how close I came to letting it ring, about how different everything would be if I hadn't answered. People talk about closure like it's a door you shut behind you. I don't think that's how it works. I think closure is something you build, day after day, with effort and patience and forgiveness. Danny didn't come back as the brother I lost. He came back as the man who survived, and that's enough. He's not defined by what was done to him. He's defined by what he chooses now, to learn, to work, to belong, to stay. My brother came back from the dead, not as a miracle meant to impress the world, but as a quiet reminder that even after everything, a life can begin again.